Hello book nerds, it's another month, which means reading wrap up and a TBR. So excuse me as I sit out here on my hammock trying to soak in those last days that I can use it. Actually, I plan on using this even if I have to wrap up in a blanket. I really think it would be good for me. But anyway, I'm holding up my camera with my knees, so if it falls, it falls. I'm going to go through the books that I read for August in the order that I read them, pretty much. And then I will share with you some books that I hope to read or at least pick up in the month of September. Overall, August was a fantastic reading month. It was still summer for me, and so I got a lot of reading done and a lot of really good books. So I also started taking stats of the books, or keeping stats of the books I was reading. It may not be 100% accurate because I kind of at the end was just rushing through because I stopped keeping track at like book 8 and I read 27 books. Right? 23 books. So my overall stats, the most read genre was realistic fiction. The most read format was audiobook. The most read setting was the USA. And most read authors were women, white, and American. I'm proud of myself for reading women authors, but I do want to bring up people of color more often, or read authors of color more often. So I did read 8 realistic fiction, 4 fantasy, 2 romance, 4 sci-fi, 2 dystopian, 1 memoir, 1 nonfiction, and 1 mystery. I did not read any picture books. I read 8 middle grade and 8 YA, and then 5 adult, 10 audiobooks, 4 paperback, 6 hardcover, and 6 ebooks. 6 books were published in 2023, which I'm very glad of that number, and 1 was from 21 to 22 and older than 2025 books. Again, I didn't keep track of that very well because that does not add up to 23. Most of the books, so 12 of the books I read were between 200 and 350 pages. 6 of them were 350 to 500. 1 book was over 500 pages, and then 1 book was 51 to 200 pages. 12 books are from the library. 4 books I purchased, 5 were ARCs. I like that number. I like that 4 books were purchased. That's a good number, and 5 ARCs. That's a really good number too. Like I said, most books that I read were by white authors and women authors. I did read, 11 were by white authors, 17 were by women, 5 by men, 4 black authors, 2 Asian authors, 3 Australian authors. Actually, that could be like 6 Australian authors because I think the Illuminae series, it's 2 authors and they're both Australian, but yeah. 3 books with Australian authors. 1 Iranian author, 7 American authors, 1 New Zealand author, 1 Mexican American, and 2 indigenous authors. And then settings, 12 were in the USA, 2 were in Europe, 2 were out of school, 2 fantasy worlds, 1 took place during the summer, 1 took place in a library, and 3 in space, and 1 in Mexico. And then I have some quotes that I really loved. This first one is from Jarrett Lerner's Work in Progress, and it says, "That's what I feel like so often, a work in progress, not finished, not yet, never finished, always changing. There's something amazing in that." I love that quote. This quote was from Jet Jameson. "Every burned book enlightens the world." And I thought with everything going on right now, that's a really powerful quote. Good way, I hate to say good way to look at things, but another way to look at things. And then this last one was from Your Plantation Prom is Not Okay. We're not just here to tear down their monument. Oh my gosh. We're not just here to tear down their monuments. We're here to help erect new ones. I think that book was so powerful. Okay, so now let's get into the specific books. Rain, and I love summer showers. Oh, it's so hot. It's like 90 degrees, but I hear thunder, and that's kind of exciting. Okay, so I'm looking down because I'm looking at my notebook. I try to look up at you as much as I can, but here are the books I picked up, and kind of in order of what I read them, how I read them. So Work in Progress by Jarrett Lerner. This was a novel in verse with illustrations in it. He's an author who illustrates a lot. He does some early chapter books or some fun graphic novels, and this one was a novel, his first novel in verse. It was also kind of a memoir. It was loosely inspired by things that had happened in his life, and so it dealt with issues of body image and an eating disorder and bullying, which I thought were really powerful, especially as a male protagonist. And the quote that I wrote down is, "We are all a work in progress, always adapting and changing, never perfect, just to be you and be kind to yourself. Someone will appreciate that version of you." And I just, that may have came from the back of the book, but that was just, I loved the story. I highly recommend. It's middle grade, and it was very powerful. Another one that I read that's also middle grade, it was The Braid Girls by Sherry Winston. This I listened to as an audiobook. This is a book about entrepreneurs, which is a lot of fun. I teach this as a class for my middle schoolers, so I'll bring up this book, but it's multiple POV. It takes place at a summer camp, and they are, it's a group of 3. So 2 are best friends, sisters, they call themselves, and one has recently, her dad discovered he had another child, and she was living in another country, I can't remember, and her mom died. So she is now living with them. So it's also sisters in a sense of a new sister, and it's just a lot of changing friendships and changing family and changing, bringing in new people, and it was a lot of fun. The Braid Girls, their business is braiding hair, and I loved how they tried to market it. I loved the enemies in it trying to come in, and how they kind of threw shade at each other with their hair, and it was just really interesting. There was also a little bit of love, romance in there, so it was a really fun book. And then I read The Lost Library by Rebecca Steed and Wendy Mass, and this one was also an ARC, and it was so stinking adorable, and it has a cat character, it has a little free library, there's a mystery, there are ghosts, there's multiple POVs. This book was just a fun read, and it covered a lot of different themes, and I don't know, it's hard to describe, but book lovers would love this book, and it was just a lot of fun. I also picked up The League of Gentlemen Witches at this time by India Holton, but decided to put this down because I want to buy copies and annotate. So stay tuned on that one. After The Lost Library, I read Your Plantation Prom is Not Okay by Kelly McWilliams. This dealt with history, racism, it had grief, it had rage, it was young adult, and it had activism and friendship and how to use your rage in a productive way. There's a scene where she gets into it with a Karen and throws a chicken at her, and I just was so good. I mean, there are times where you can't just be nice, and I liked how this book talked about that. You can't always just be nice, and the dad in this book is one who believes in being nice and just being don't ruffle feathers, and eventually you'll get to where we're supposed to be. And the main character in this book is not having it, and she is ready to change, and she's angry with what is happening right now. So I highly recommend that book. I loved it. I I learned a lot. I think a lot about now, like the land that we are on, what history it holds, and also just how others who have ties to that land may have trauma. So, for example, with this, I can't remember her name, but she, they live on an old plantation. They've reimagined and repurposed the land to be a, what did they call it? An enslaved people's museum, but she has trauma still tied to that land. And when she thinks about what happened on that land and the people who died and were hurt, it really hurts her. And same with like indigenous peoples who may see their lands being torn apart, and it affects them in a way that I can't understand. And so something that I like that I'm being made aware of. So very important book. Okay, then I read City of Speed, which is book 2 by Alex London and the City Dragons book. This is one I've been reading with my daughter, and it's middle grade and dragons and so much fun. It's adventure, it's friendship, very LGBTQIA friendly for kids, and I loved the family and the friendships in this book, and the ending was really good. Like, we jumped right into the third book. I listened to on audiobook Davenports by Crystal Marquis. This was a YA romance, multiple POV, love triangles kind of thing. Bridgerton vibes. Hated the ending. Kind of ruined it for me. And also everything was pretty predictable. And I wanted more of rebellion to feminist norms, or to norms of women in that time. And yeah, I'm not sure I was happy with where it went. If you read it, I'd love to talk to you about it, because I have a lot of mixed emotions about this book and what it could have been, possibly. I like what it did. I liked what it was trying to do, but there were just some parts, and maybe it was just too much for that book. I read a graphic novel, First Time for Everything by Dan Santat. This is a memoir of him going abroad as a kid and experiencing the world, and it was just a great story. Him growing up, there were some things that they did that killed me, like they drank with their teacher in Germany because, they could, and that was just kind of weird, but different times. But a cool story, and a little bit of a romance, and I love those little middle grade romances. The first crushes, shouldn't even call it romance, little crushes are so cute. After that, I read Obsidio, which is book 3 in the Illuminae files, and it was the series finale. There is a novella that I think is a prequel that I got, Memento, and so, but otherwise I think the series is done. I loved how it all came together. I say 3 stories. There are 3 love interests, 3 couples. They all come together, and they're all fighting and doing and saving and bringing their families together and figuring out what happened to their families, and then trying to bring everyone to justice. I really, really loved how it all came together. I read House of Marion by JL. I don't know if I'm saying that right. This is like a kind of a dark academia magic school book, and it's fantasy, like forbidden magic, YA, and I loved the crowns in it. I want a crown, like I want a tiara, please. The vibes in this book were so dark and wonderful, and I really liked it. I liked the mystery, how some parts were played up more than others, but then in the end it was kind of switched. Kind of hard to explain. I can't wait for the second one, and I hope JL, it better be soon. One of my favorite middle grade of all time, classic middle grade, are Vanderbeekers books by Karina Young Glaser, and I read book 6 as an audiobook. They go on vacation. They're trying to pick up their dad, who's been stranded in like Indiana, so they want to go on a road trip, pick up dad, and then continue going on a road trip to like California from New York. And I just love the series. I love the shenanigans. There's a little bit of romance and like setting up a character, which was a lot of fun. And it's centered around 4 siblings in this family, and they're all like doing their own. Is it 4 siblings or 5? There's twins, Oliver, 5 siblings. Always lots of animals too. So it was a lot. It was a really good audiobook, and they're short, and like I said, they read very classical. Like, they're just good, wholesome stories. Next I read Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. This one I listened to it as an audiobook. It had vampires, it has forbidden love, miscommunication, storm is coming. Are the vampires coming? I didn't like it as much as I wanted to, and I'm gonna have to go inside now. But anyway, it wasn't enough horror. It was a lot of romance and a lot of repetition, and I just wanted the vampire fights to happen, and they didn't as much. Okay, we're gonna keep trying. No, we're not. The wind is blowing. I'll show you. Look at those clouds coming in. Now I gotta take down the hammock. It was taken down before I get rained on. Holy moly. That is very concerned for me. Hi, buddy. It's like, come inside, it's gonna rain. I'm gonna try to just finish this while I'm out here, just because I don't feel like setting up inside and all that. So, the next book I read, so I'm sorry if the wind is loud, but it's not raining yet, so we're good. The next book I read was We Still Belong by Christine Day, and this is also by an Indigenous author who, it was also an ARC and middle grade, and it's all about finding your place, finding your voice, using your voice. And I liked how, I'm sorry, my nose is itchy. I like how it took place over a single day. Basically, it's about a girl who writes a poem for her school newspaper about Indigenous Peoples Day. And it was published on Columbus Day. So her school can start recognizing Indigenous Peoples Day instead. And her hope is that her teacher, so he always reads aloud everyone's poems that gets published in the paper to the class, and they analyze them, and they stand up and take a bow and applaud and all these things. Well, she doesn't get that, and I think you can guess why. She didn't want to stir up trouble, and so her just dealing with that, plus the most adorable middle grade crush ever, made this book amazing. And I also read it while reading this next book, Warrior Girl Unearthed, and I learned a lot about Indigenous peoples, about being a part of a tribe and the blood quantity kind of thing. Missing, murdered Indigenous women was mentioned in it, just briefly in the middle grade book, but enough that it gets you curious and wanting to research. And so I thought it was a great middle grade book, really fantastic. Then I read Warrior Girl Unearthed, and this was part of my book club. It's YA because the character is 16, but I had trouble like trying to figure out not that teens wouldn't read it, it's just it didn't seem like it was geared toward teenagers, but maybe it is. It is a good mystery. There is romance, there's friendship stuff. She is doing an internship over the summer. I mean, there's a lot of things that they could identify with. It just also felt like literary fiction, I guess. It was a companion to Firekeeper's Daughter, which I thought was really cool. Donis is the aunt of the main character in this book, which I thought was just so cool. And I wish I still had my copy of Firekeeper's Daughter, but I think I gave it to a friend, which is not a bad thing, but now I want it back. Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez was just a fun romance. It was funny, although the ending tore me apart. This book, I was very emotional, and at the end, I do want to read the Happy Ever playlist with Sloane as the main character, her best friend, because this book, although it was a fun read, was also super sad. So unexpectedly sad. I listened to a self-help book called Present Over Perfect. It was pretty good. And then City of Secrets, which was the third and final book by Alex London, and the City of Dragons book that I'm reading with my daughter. We finished that. Great finale. Again, lots of fun, lots of adventure. I loved the ending. I love how everything ended up, and dragons. Then I picked the last book I read in August was a fantastic one. Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Ellie Cosimano. Oh my gosh, I giggled from start to finish. And in with my giggling was also like just anxiety over what was going to happen to her. And, you know, it's like a murder for hire by accident kind of thing. And just, is she going to get caught? And I loved it. I loved it so much. Other books I also picked up this month but didn't finish was The Winglets Quartet, which is another one I'm starting with my daughter. Unpregnant, which is my band's book club pick. Ace of Spades, Their Vicious Games, which is an arc. Control, which is another, I didn't receive it as an arc, but I received it from the author because she also asked me to read the sequel as an arc. And then Clara Poole and The Long Way Round is also another middle grade arc. So that is it. Also, I'm literally holding my phone camera like by hand. I've got to figure out, I don't know. I use my phone camera. I don't want to buy a whole new camera to do all this, but anyway, I don't have a stand and yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about, my top 3 reads of all of those were Warrior Girl Unearthed, House of Marion, and Illuminate Files, which I know doesn't count as one, but those are my top reads. Okay, now for what I want to read in September, and I'm really excited about my spread, so I'm going to show you. Just look how gorgeous this is. I mean, September reading. The stickers are from My Thoughtful Place, which is, like, look, this is how they came. My Thoughtful Space, sorry. Her handle is also Cups and Thoughts on Instagram, and she also has one for Thoughtful Space. Anyway, so I used her stickers. Here are the book club books I'm reading for September. I'm in 4 different book clubs. Unpregnant, In the Key of Us, Probability of Everything, and None of This is True. So Unpregnant is my band's book club. In the Key of Us is my middle grade writing book club. Probability of Everything is more of a buddy read than a book club. It's with 2 other writing friends, and we're reading this together. Actually, they finished. I haven't even started. And None of This is True is my adult book club. Then, because it's September, we've got to do some fantasy reads. Excuse me, wind. So here are my top fantasy. TBR. Hazelwood is a book that I picked up. Oh, it's starting to rain now. Take a look. I'm sorry, this is a chaotic video, but I'm just loving it right now. I hope you like it. I'm also thinking of witchy books this month, but I don't know yet. I'm thinking cozy right now. Witchy might be October plus horror. I don't know. Last thing I wanted to share with you is this spread that's in my regular notebook. There's the thunder. And this one has my arcs for September in it and other books I want to read and then books I've picked up. So here are my arcs. Nothing Else But Miracles, My Rogue to Ruin, Fault Lines, The Grimmer, Made for It, This Indian Kid, Bone, More Tall Tales. That one might need to go on my fantasy TBR. Cat on the Run, Finch House, Zombie Season, and It Found Us. That one looks super scary. And then for craft, I'm still reading Magic Words, and then I already explained these 3, and those are books I've already picked up. So here we go. Thanks for staying with me during this rainy vlog. I've actually quite enjoyed it. The smell of the rain is amazing, but I am going to go inside because the wind is really blowing and I'm getting wet. But I'm excited for September, and school has started, but I'm starting to get into the groove of things, so I hope that reading kind of takes a more front seat again. It's been a rough couple weeks with balancing the books I need to read. I hate having books I need to read, but I really do, and I've kind of let them go. So this weekend has been good for me to reset and look at everything I need to be reading and getting excited about the books that I want to read. And yeah, so here, take one last gander at all of the rain. Here we go.